current seniors are going to return their MacBooks and their chargers, and that goes with their diploma that I had mentioned earlier. So they're going to bring that back, hand over their stuff, and then we're going to hand over the diploma. But students in all other grades are going to keep their computers to support their summer programs and enrollment in instruction. So if you are a George Mason student, you also are not going to be required to turn in your MacBook. We've found a way that we can actually update the technology remotely. So I want to thank Dang and his team for that. And then any incoming freshmen will complete a laptop exchange in early August when they return their Henderson laptop, and they'll be issued a Mason laptop, assuming we start in August. Any fees that students that are outstanding, and high school students oftentimes will have fees that are outstanding, we will invoice those electronically, but it's not going to stop us from doing anything with those students as we move forward. And then SEBI is going to notify Gilbane at that point in time that they aren't going to be able to park in our Kiss and Ride, which they currently are doing. And we should be in pretty good shape construction-wise on that June 6th and 7th to do that drop-off. The only other thing that's going on at that time is it looks like we are going to be doing the secure vestibule work at Henderson, but we figured out that there are a number of doors that we can use, so that's good. So that's the pickup and drop-off plan for students, and that's the clean-out process for our staff. And again, the clean-out process for staff, it's a long horizon here. It's all the way up till June 7th. So staff can feel comfortable coming in, working through their buildings, and then parents right now can plan for their drop-off, particularly the secondary parents, that June 6th and June 7th. So I've got one more thing, Mr. Anderson, but any questions about any of that?
Any questions from anyone on that part of the update?
All right.
Not seeing any burning questions, Dr. Noonan, so please continue.
Great, thanks. And so we will continue to communicate that widely. You're getting a preview of the information for community. So that's going to come out later this week in the Friday update. So I wanted you to know that. The last thing I wanted to share, and tonight I want to share it with you just to assure you that it's on our radar, is what is our plan for opening next year? And that is a great idea, or a great question that none of us have the answer to. However, even though we don't have answers, we are running through multiple scenarios and doing planning around multiple scenarios. And right now we have about 6 different scenarios that we have looked at that run the gambit from starting on time, face-to-face, all systems are go, all the way to we don't open until November or December, and have some planning around that as well. But I do want to give you a sense of some of the things that we are kicking around, if you will, to make sure that in any one of those scenarios, which by the way, each of these scenarios have a million different details that have to be accounted for, and it's going to be a really complicated task. And again, a lot of our decision making is going to be based on guidance that Atif Carney, our Secretary of Education in Virginia, announced today that schools will be getting some further information and guidance in June. And it's only May 4th or 5th. So we're still a ways away from even hearing what the state has with respect to guidance. But once we get better guidance, we'll have some sense of what we're going to do, because we are really building out these scenarios to begin thinking about them. But we have multiple options. And just to give you a sense of some of the things that we've talked about would be traditional face-to-face instruction provided by our teachers in our classrooms, assuming that we don't have to do any social distancing in August, which is a stretch to think that we wouldn't have to, but we would just come back and we would do that. If there were some parents that were uncomfortable with sending their students back at that time, We have also contemplated what it might look like to live stream from some of our classrooms for a very brief period of time, maybe 4 weeks or so that parents would regain some comfort with bringing their students back. It would also help us mitigate any loss of students. We really, in the end, we want to maintain our student population in the City of Falls Church, and we want to work with families to try to maintain that population. Some other things that we've talked about is doing sort of a modified synchronous and asynchronous programming. And the synchronous potentially could be face-to-face. So we could potentially adjust our schedule where half the students come in the morning, half the students come in the afternoon. The students that come in the morning are getting some online instruction in the afternoon, and vice versa. Some of the students might be getting some instruction in the morning online and then come in the afternoon. We've also contemplated an every other day schedule, sort of an A-B day. Half the students come on A days, half the students come on B days. Then maybe Wednesday is an off day, and then it's online, and then we have another A day and another B day. That idea came from school board member Dimmock, who knows somebody in California that was running a system like that. But these are all things that we're sort of kicking around. And if we were to move to that, we also might consider doing some live streaming for parents that continue to feel uncomfortable. We've also considered, in the event that we can't come back, doing all online instruction, continuing doing what we're doing now in each of these scenarios. And those would be all within the context of starting on our August 24th date. Some other options that are out there are, if it looks like things are slowly but surely beginning to resolve, and if we could come back, say, mid-September and do full instruction with everybody, one of the things that we might want to consider is doing some online instruction for a very brief period of time and then coming back, or potentially even looking at revisiting our calendar. And I hesitate to say that because I know it was such a challenge for all of us, but if it is something that ultimately could support our work going forward, it might be something that we might want to consider. But again, in each of these scenarios, we start with the face-to-face and we go all the way to full online instruction. And we are, again, looking at a variety of different scenarios. And we are confident that even if we get pushed out to, say, November, that we can provide a high quality instructional program, not unlike what we're doing right now, up to that November date. The only question then is, when might we start school? And does it make sense for us to come back on August 24th, knowing that we won't open until November 1st? And I just think those are some things that we're starting to kick around as well internally. And the last scenario that we are contemplating is for rolling closures due to illness. If there are spikes that we find that begin in January of next year, what if we have to close? And right now, what we are looking at is treating those closures like snow days. That would be one extent, would be treating it like a snow day where there wouldn't be any instruction, but custodians would come back and do deep cleaning. Our public nurses would collaborate with FCCPS in contact tracing and also supporting the reopening process, all the way to, if we're closed for more than 5 days, going back to our online instruction to make sure that we are set up and ready to go. So there are a million questions that all of us have, and I share those questions. So for example, one question might be, well, let's say we're back and we're doing an A-B and you got 15 kids in a 3rd grade classroom and one of the kids gets sick. Does the whole class then have to quarantine for 10 days? And what happens for that class that gets quarantined? So I asked that question to the Fairfax County Health Department this last week. And the answer to all of the questions is, and it's a terrible answer, but it depends. And it depends because if there were appropriate social distancing mechanisms in place, if there was appropriate hand washing in place, if they did some contact tracing and found that the student hadn't had any interaction with any other students, we might not quarantine those students in that classroom. We might continue. But it all depends on what the contact looks like. So there are, again, a million scenarios here that we're playing out, but I do want to tonight, just more than anything, say to you, we are really trying to start planning for multiple scenarios so that when we do actually get some guidance from the state in June, we will be able to slide into one of those scenarios and really explore it even more deeply. But at this point, we just don't have any answers. So the only thing we can do in the absence of information is begin to develop our best cases as we see them and try to think them through. So forgive me for not having all of the answers, but we just don't have any of the answers at this point. So Mr. Anderson, I leave it there. But we do have I will just share with you, we have a 7-page reopening plan here that's in draft format that begins to contemplate each of these scenarios, and we're a ways away from executing.
Well, thank you, Dr. Noonan. Open it up now for questions from members, but I feel just as a point to point out, right, many of the answers to some of the questions we would ask are really going to have to be coming later, and uncertainty is a difficult thing to deal with, but unfortunately it's something we're going to kind of have to deal with to some level. So to the degree that we can ask questions tonight and have answers, let's ask those questions, but realize we may ask questions to which right now the answer is we simply don't know, and we're going to have to see where the data take us. So questions. Ms. Downs.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, Dr. Noonan. And Dr. Noonan, thank you to you and your staff for already working on all the different scenarios. I just had a question. Do you have a sense, so we'll get guidance from the state in June. Do you have a sense if VHSL will be part of that? Do they come in separately? Will this, just looking for that information, if that will be one information release coming out all together, or if they come in after the fact?
Thank you for that question. So for folks at home that don't know who the VHSL are, it's the Virginia High School League, and they are a separate entity from the state of Virginia and not under the auspices of the Virginia Department of Education. And as a consequence, they sort of operate a little bit separately from VDOE. However, one of the things that we've worked really closely on with Billy Hahn, who is the director of VHSL, is to say to Billy, you've got to come out when this guidance comes out, and we've got to be able to work together. And he has been he's been open to that. My hope is that we have some capacity to do fall sports. And I think that there's a belief system, or a prevailing belief, not a belief system, a prevailing belief at this point that we may actually have some fall sports, but they may be without fans, which would be interesting. So there may be contests, but without fans, and perhaps some testing, like just temperature checks and some things like that. But that remains to be seen. So I hesitate to say anything more about it because the VHSL will have to make their own decisions, but I would anticipate they're going to make some decisions probably sooner rather than later, because fall sports practices begin the first week of August. And parents have to do physicals and everything else.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Ms. Downs. Ms. Litton, I saw your hand up. And Ms. Russell, I have you next.
I was just curious if we've taken any look at sort of our teacher population, and maybe based on age or underlying health conditions, do we know if there's a possibility there's going to be some issues with teachers, and even if we come back, they would be more vulnerable, so we don't want them to come back?
Yes, that's a great question. We have, in fact, we have told all of our employees that are currently working that are over 65 that they're not allowed to come into the buildings at all. And we do have some currently who would be working, custodial staff, maintenance staff, bus drivers, et cetera, that are over 65. We are looking at right now the age range of our staff. We don't have any information about underlying health concerns, and obviously we can't ask that. But we are looking at age. One of the things that we want to try to do as best we can is create a circumstance where everybody feels safe and can come in. And the reason for that is, and